we are Team SKH and we are working on the problem for smart cities. So we are improving upon the existing services like smart parking. So our solution is okay. So for our team, we don't have our third member present right now, so he has some personal reasons. So I'm Karthik. I'm majoring in computer science and I'm the CEO of the team. And he's electrical engineering. He's handling all the technical aspects of Raspberry Pi and sending the data to the server. And our third team member, he's mostly tackling the business side of the product.
Yeah, so the parking problem is like very relevant in all the cities, I guess, and people waste their hours finding for the proper parking spot, and like they run out of the fuel, and they also, I mean, there are also risks of theft from the empty car which is being parked somewhere. So like our data shows that more than 17 hours per year is wasted to find a parking spot per driver, and they spend almost $345 per year on the fuel. Like that much fuel is wasted just to find the parking spot. So you can see this jam-packed parking plots. Yeah, maybe more slides. Yeah. So we wanted to make a solution for this, and we decided some parameters that our solution should provide some safety towards the theft, and it should save time, and then it should also make the going till the parking spot very efficient. So those were like the common parameters. We waited much while designing our solution. Next slide. Yeah, so we are using Raspberry Pi, AWS server, Alexa website, and mobile app. So for the Raspberry Pi, this camera module can be used for surveillance as well as to detect the empty space. Like right now, we can see that this 3-number plot is empty, and number 1 and number 2 are occupied. So if I just remove this, it shows number 2. But now it is empty, so that way we can know that which parking spot is exactly empty, and we are doing color detection in this, and we are masking it by a white color and we are eliminating all other detected colors, so we can exactly know which parking spot is empty. And in the meantime, the real-time image is being uploaded to AWS servers.
So we have the prototype for our website like this. So our website looks like this. So what our plan for implementation is that the real-time data, it will be transferred to the AWS cloud, and we'll be using Amazon Web Services to just upload the data directly to the website just with the post method or something. And this is our website for that. And we are also sometimes when you're right in the garage, you can't just like look into the phone and look into the app to find the parking spot. So it's way more convenient if you just ask Alexa like how to just find your parking spot. It'll just tell you like on the current level where the empty parking spot is. So we have also built this Alexa skill for finding the parking spot. So if I try this out, Alexa, activate parking spot. Alexa, ask parking spot where to park.
Please park your car onto the 3rd spot to the left.
So it speaks according to that, because if the car is entering from that side, you can see that the 3rd spot is empty right now, and it will just park itself right there. So that's how the Alexa is integrated with the whole database that is connected to the AWS. So this is a handy feature. If you do not want to just like log into the app and just check the parking spots. So this is a handy feature. It can also be integrated into if you have seen like in the cars we have Android Auto, or Apple also has their own system. So all of them do have their own voice integrated services. So Alexa can be used, or we can even use Google Assistant with that. So yeah, we just explained this. So yeah, so what are the benefits of using Smart Park? So the number one benefit is that we have built this thing like we can have paid members to reserve the spot. So they can just like look into the spot that is empty way ahead of time, and they can just like reserve that spot for themselves. Then the smart camera module that ensures like security surveillance. So your car, you know that your car is parked over there, and you.
I apologize, but 5 minutes is up. Yeah. Start Q&A.
Okay. So right now you said what information are you uploading to the servers?
So to the server, this image will be uploaded. That will be like
Mhm.
sending like which parking spot is empty,
Mhm.
as well as it will tell like the number, which is the number of parking spot that is empty. So so the Alexa will just speak out that number, and on the app you can see the whole parking.
Yeah. So why upload the entire image? What other options have you
Yeah,
considered?
so we are uploading the whole image because if some members they want to reserve a parking spot way ahead of time, they can just choose their parking spot on whatever level they want. So that is why so they can just reserve it through the web app. And this Alexa skill is because if you're just inside the garage and if you just want to use that, so you can just use
I
it.
mean, like while you're driving, if you're alone in the car, then you can't just drive and see the app at the same time. Like you have to find.
Right.
And for this, we are using Raspberry Pi because if let's say I have some vacant spot somewhere and it is occupied by somebody at that moment, then also we come to know. That's why we are like uploading each and every frame.
Yeah. So
to the AWS server.
wouldn't that have a pretty significant? If you're uploading the image, wouldn't that have pretty significant impact on cost?
We are changing the image to like we can do that. We can change that to arrays, like the NumPy arrays, or we can send them as like.
Yeah, whether it's a like you can arrange it as arrays or a bitmap or anything of that nature, but still you're sending the image, and wouldn't that impact cost?
No, like
No?
it
Okay.
will just take some space, and we are reducing the space by changing it to numbers. Like we'll be just sending it in arrays, not the pixels, image, and all the RGB values.
Where would you implement this first?
Maybe ASU.
Yeah, we have seen that like there's a huge problem whenever there are like concerts or games happening in the parking lot. So right now we'll start with the ASU and then to the city, and then we can scale it accordingly.
Any other questions?
Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Actually make any noise.
Yeah.
So I'll just kind of quietly give them a 1 minute heads up, and then this will go off, and then I'll do I'll set a timer for 3 minutes for Q&A. You know, if we get to that point, it'll go off again.
Okay, can you give us like a 1 minute left for Q&A?
Yep.
Just so we know. Okay,
Yep.
cool. Thank you.
Let's just get really close to the camera.
Okay, so we're gonna try the timer up there.
Okay.
So that'll count down from 5 minutes. I'll still give you guys a 1 minute heads up.
Yeah. Nice.
We don't know what the volume level of the is, so I
I think
apologize.
we're good.
Alright,
Yeah.
and the timer will go off.
It's like a shot clock.
Yeah, basically. And then you guys will have 3 minutes of Q&A, and I'll still give you the 1 minute heads up.
Thank you.
Oh, just need to see the sound and so okay.
Team Canby, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good.
Alright.
Alright.
Good.
We're testing out the volume.
Oh. That's something like a fire alarm.
It's gonna be the EWS.
Let's not.
Do that mouth sounds like
Oh, I guess it doesn't.
not bad.
So,
That's good.
That works.
Could be worse.
We've heard worse.
so I'll still give you guys the 1 minute heads up for today.
Cool.
Yep.
Bro, we're gonna spend longer a week.
Oh,
Alright, I'm ready on the set.
Alright. Okay, so we are Canby and we're presenting the EWS for Kids, which stands for Early Warning System. So the problem that we're answering is pedestrian industries, and we specifically focused on children playing in the street. So today, children are often playing in the street with their friends, playing soccer or something, and then they'll kick the ball too far and run after it. But the problem with that is they often are distracted and not looking for cars actively, and then they'll get hit. And that leads to about 1/5 of all fatalities in children were related or in a vehicle-related accident.
So our solution is the EWS, or Early Warning System for Playing Kids in the Streets.
Some of the
So design requirements. Obviously, it has to be able to identify moving objects and vehicles, and then based on that, signal in some form or another. It has to be easily deployable and retrievable, so it's not a nuisance to the parents or anyone else involved. And then it has to be kid-friendly.
Going off that kid friendliness, we actually looked into the idea of using the fact that the ultrasonic sensors are like shaped like eyes to make it a little more appealing to children, because it's like we could put a face on it, for instance. We also looked into the idea of like doing different types of heights and seeing how plausible those are, and different types of structures such as cones.
So here's how it works. The parents of the children will take it out to the sidewalk and they'll put it by the street. Using the onboard cameras and the onboard object recognition, it'll detect these objects such as cars and flying objects. And using that information, it will produce an audio cue and a visual cue to safely evacuate the children from the streets.
Some of the benefits of the solution, the primary one that we're going for is less accidents for children playing in the streets. How did we do this? Well, we thought about it as a bi-directional issue, right? So there's things in ways to inform the driver and warn the driver to slow down and be cautious, but we're looking at it more like about warning the children now. And also now parents can be at ease that their children are safer in the streets, which is very important to us.
So current solutions are just static signs. And the issue with this is that, first of all, you might not even notice it, and then if you do, you might not even act on it, because often they're out there when there aren't children at play. Our solution, on the other hand, actively adapts based on the environment and informs not only the driver, but also the child.
So here's a solution that we propose for this problem statement. We are using two ultrasonic sensors to detect the objects and the distance that the objects are from the beacon. We have an IR remote that will control the volume of the buzzer, which it can increase the volume, decrease the volume, and even mute the volume if need be. So if an object comes by, currently it's in the mute state. So you can just unmute it, you can increase the volume if you want to, and play some song with that.
So there's three main businesses that we would like to sell to. The first would be large resellers that we can sell our device to and then reach a much larger audience. And the second audience we would like to target are parents with children who often are active, but the parents cannot always watch them. And then the third audience would be daycares or other facilities in which there is a large child population and they cannot always watch them.
So how do we go forward? So the first thing would be to add cameras and then improve the sensors. This would allow us to implement object recognition into the device. And the final thing would be to meet the needs of the power. And we really want to aim for a long-lasting device that keeps the kids safe all day while they play. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so you mentioned adding cameras. What would you be doing with that image data?
So I would like to answer that. So we would probably train a data set that will be involving different types of cars or a moving person or even like a flying bird or any type of objects that could be encountered on a day-to-day basis, and train the data and process it to a microcontroller or a microprocessor like a Jetson Nano or Raspberry Pi, and then train the camera to detect those objects and like provide that output that we want.
Mm-hmm. So, especially when working with, targeting kids as a beneficiary of this product, images, storing images of kids could potentially be legally sticky.
Yeah.
So, what would you ultimately like? Where does this image data go? How do you ensure that it's not misused?
Right. Well, part of it is that I don't believe the children will be getting filmed because it's supposed to be set up near the outer edges of where the children are playing because it's supposed to detect the cars before they hit the kids.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be at the very outskirts where the kids can still hear it, but it's looking for cars, not for kids.
Okay.
But with the data itself, we would make sure that it just doesn't get in the wrong hands.
Another thing is that it's not actually connected to any Wi-Fi or any Bluetooth in that sense, and so it can't actually share. It can't share any data.
Okay.
It can't be hacked in any way.
Yeah, the plan is all localized processing and active processing real time, not storing of data later.
Okay.
So the idea of this is to allow the kids let the kids hear the sound so they know not to run into the streets.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess thinking about the problem, right? So ideally they would be able to see the kids would be able to see the cars. So now this is adding another sense of hearing. How might you try to combat the fact that sometimes the kids are just distracted running into the street? Do you
Right,
think
so
this
that
sounds better?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be done with different audio cues that are more intense or less intense depending on the scenario.
And then you also mentioned that you were wanting to improve notification for drivers. How does that work?
That would be like the lighting feature. Like when we were presenting it, there's actually a white light and a red light that shows. And if the driver sees a red light appear, he might be like, oh, well, what does that mean? And then they see it and they're like, oh, well, there's children at play. Let's slow down, see what's going on, and kind of assess the situation in which I'm in.
So do you think that's better than putting the slow children sign in the
Yes.
middle of the road?
Yeah,
Why is
because
that?
those are static. They're there all the time, but you'll notice a light change from green to red more than you'll notice something that's just sitting on the side of the road. Seeing things move or change is more noticeable than things that are static.
Also, like a lot of parents will put those things, those signs out there and then leave it there, even when their children are not in place. So a lot of times, those people in the neighborhood won't take it seriously anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
That won't work. No, HDMI to USB-C doesn't work. Is there a VGA on there? We have the same laptop. There's no computer on campus, or yeah, all the things on campus do that. Focus is up there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, judges, for giving us the opportunity to pitch our idea in front of you. We are developing a model based on the theme of smart cities. It's called Project SLIM. It stands for Self-Learning Intelligent Model for Financial Aid Disbursement. So in September 2017, we also saw the case of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. $91 billion USD were in damages and approximately 3,000 people died. By the government, $5 billion USD in funds were granted since 2017 until 2019, out of which 1.5 billion were for the personal needs of people. Later, months after 2017, it was realized that the funding process was not correct. The funds didn't reach the people who actually needed them, and over-approval of funds was seen for people who did not quite require that many funds. So we have a problem here. When a disaster hits, the main issue is the efficient management and distribution of funds among people, and the process of distribution is not streamlined for everybody to receive the equal access to that. and it's not divided by the population or the need of the population, how much funds who requires. So here we propose a solution. What if a system can be built which allows the efficient distribution of these funds from the government to the non-profit organizations, and which will be released according to the demand and which will cancel out their mismanagement. So we propose engineering a self-learning and continuously learning model which will provide an interface to the federal, state and local governments to distribute funds to the non-profit organizations, which will then be released to people who need them during disasters. And this application will be in compliance with the Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, which is currently the basis for release of disaster funds by the US government. How does this work? Our project will work in 4 steps. First of all, the aid will be estimated using the software that we build, and it will be compared with the demand from the non-profit organizations which are in direct contact with the people who are suffering from disasters. It will be approved or disapproved by the government, different levels of government based on the magnitude of the disaster, and our model will relearn from the feedback which we receive from the organizations and which will be applied to upcoming disasters.
So here's a projection of what our interface will look like based on the current distribution of current data of how FEMA has distributed funds based on prior incidences such as the New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Harvey with Texas. So we just made a standardized model using their aid and how they distributed it, and determined through this map how the aid should have been distributed in Puerto Rico based on population, which is the size of the circle, and then the amount of money given, which is on the shade of the circle. And so our model gives a prediction, and we just compared that to the amount the government actually gave. We determined with a few of the recent disasters, Hurricane Maria, they actually gave a little bit too much, but our research also showed that there was a significant amount of money that was wasted with supplies not being distributed correctly. And then in some situations the government gave too little, and some they kind of gave just the right amount.
So how the current market works is that a disaster happens, and then the federal government distributes funds to the state governments, which is then spread out to the local city governments, and that's how it's distributed to the people and to NGOs to get supplies, etc. So, but this has been completely inefficient. There is a gross overestimation of funds required, or gross underestimation of the funds required. So what we are trying to do is we have a target audience of the federal, state and local governments. So we are basically going to target federal funds. Any funds which are going to be given by the federal government has to go through our system and will be distributed to the state and local governments. So the business model will be the federal government will ask all the state governments to set up everything through our program, and it will be like a streamlined process which will be like approval process from the federal to the state and to the local governments. So there are 2 current programs which are competition. One is cyber grants and donation exchange, which kind of work in a similar process, but they are mostly focused on private funding from individuals like us. What we want to do is to get transparent allotment of funds based on population demand, which our model predicts, and also use data analytics and relearning process based on the feedback from NGOs to improve this. The costs associated are the last one.
So why do you have the experience to justify where the funds go?
Sorry?
Why are you the people to pick where the funding will go?
So we will not pick and choose where the funding goes. We will provide the government what is the requirement, and they will make their decisions based on that. Right now, it is very the study behind how the funding are demanded is not very clear. So we give them the model. We're like, okay, you need this much amount to help people in this area, and they make the decision after that. So in case a government asks for $10 million, but they actually need only $5 million, we give them that information, and then the government can decide based on that.
So how are you figuring out how much they need? What can you walk me step by step?
So yeah, that's me. So basically, we used historical data about how the government has given in the past. Our model doesn't take into too many factors, but the point is that we need to incorporate more. One thing we did look at was how FEMA has given to individuals for supplies, how many people were approved, the population of the state or the city. Other factors we can look into are property values and
Cost of living
Yeah,
in the
cost of
city,
living
yeah,
as well.
and how that affects.
So, tackling the problem of aid distribution is a pretty substantial area. Why do you feel like, so you're starting at the federal level, starting on the, how federal will grant aid. There's a lot of movement of resources and money from the federal level to where it finally gets to the individuals where it's needed. Is this necessarily the right spot to start, or have you considered other areas to start with this problem?
So a lot of times the state government has a surplus of funds, and they still request for funds from the federal government, especially like we can really help in those stages where we can be like, okay, the federal government really does not need to come in here at this point, and the state government can handle it and really help them manage like disasters based on whatever they have, if that makes sense. So we don't have to like.
Since it's not a personal opinion of anyone in that streamline, it's just all based on the data that is existing of how funds were released in the previous years and how they were different from what was actually required.
So you feel like it's an easier spot to start because it's more detached from
yes.
the.
So
Yes,
for
since
example,
no money is coming to us, it's directly the government's approval or disapproval. We're just giving them a clear picture of what's required.
for example, in the case of Puerto Rico, the government was bankrupt. Whereas in the case of Harvey, actually their state government had surplus, so we can help in that regard.
So that's the time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it HDMI-C?
Yeah.
Yeah, that won't work.
Won't work?
No,
Why is that?
I don't know. Mine doesn't work either. So you need to do what they just did. Get the other laptop. Unless your adapter does VGA to USB-C. Does it have that option? No. Anthony, you want Anthony, you want to tell teams they can't do HDMI to USB-C?
I mean, I already told everyone that they have trouble. Like, their presentations on like. since you emailed me.
It's not new.
It's not new. So then I don't see yours popping up, and we know this one works.
Okay, let's go.
Are we gonna leave this here? Or I can grab another one if you need it there. I can grab another chair. Newspaper or anything? You good? Mike, so you guys go for road file?
Yep. That's really helpful.
Are we good to go?
You guys ready?
Even possible.
Give me a second.
Hello everyone. So today my team Impossible is going to present about the pedestrian problem. So my name is Parth.
He's Ahmed. He's Crispin. I'm Ankit and Vinny.
Vinny. Oh, sorry.
My friend Vinny is highly addicted to smartphones, as you can see. And the last line must be familiar to you guys. The biggest problem that we're facing nowadays is that in the age of smartphones, everyone is addicted to their phones and they are like distracted all the time. We talk about pedestrian accidents due to distracted driving, but no one tackles the issue of distracted walking. With that in mind, the problem that we are looking at today is increased crosswalk fatalities due to interruptions in visual and auditory senses of pedestrians in their immediate proximity.
So now I talk about supporting data. Like there are around 6,000 fatalities in 2018. It's like 50% more than 2008, and like this time it is the highest in 28 years. And 80% of the accident happened because of this text issue using mobile phones. Mostly warm states have those 50% casualties, and you'll find this problem in big metropolitan cities where there is more population. And now I've talked about some existing solutions. There are some states introduce fines if you're using mobile phones. There are traffic guides, or you have signboards, and even you have lights for indication if you can cross the road or not. And now my friend Vinith will talk about our solution.
So we see that distracted people are completely shut off their senses from their immediate dangers during the crossing roads. So our solution tackles the problem at its heart. So what we have here is basically a mat-like structure that will be installed at every corners of crosswalk, and that mat-like structure will have a light and a vibrating sensor inside that. So imagine you're walking with your phone like I was just right now and I didn't see what was happening. The light will start flashing if the signal is red, and if you somehow happen to miss the light which is embedded down the ground, there is a vibrating sensor in the mat. So when you cross the light, and it's embedded just a little before the crossroads, so when you put your feet on it, it will vibrate, and you cannot ignore a touch sense like that. The best thing about our product is that it is in sync with the light systems that are already in place, and it is completely sustainable with with what we plan to do ahead is use mats that generate electricity when you walk on them. This mats will also give you footstep data and other data about maintenance about the product.
So our solution is very simple. We are going to embed our sensors at crossroads. Basically, these sensors are able to detect when the pedestrian traffic is green or red. So when it's red and the user steps on the mat, they will give him a visual, acoustic, and haptic feedback. If otherwise, it just serves as an image harvester. Check this out. So in this scenario, the traffic light is red, but then it's trying to cross. In the second scenario, the traffic is green, so it just serves as an energy harvester. So how do we stand out? So all our system implements cutting-edge technologies to give multiple feedbacks to the user. That's visual, acoustic, and haptic feedbacks. And also it's highly scalable. And also we implement smart city technologies because the sensors also serve as energy harvesters.
So I'm going to be talking about the business model. So the cost of this is a very low cost solution. Just with an Arduino kit, we have used motor drivers and NeoPixel lights. So it's like we want to try to build on top of a existing solution where tiles are already distributed. We researched things about this and we found out that like it takes usually around like $50 per square meter and for every installation. And if you see, we have like 20,000 crossroads and 4 products like this. So at four locations, it would nearly lead to around 160K installations per state. So that would be around 4 million per state. And also, so in terms of why this product might be helpful is to understand in dominated areas like metropolitan downtown, there's a lot of pedestrians. So if you have something like this that can warn the pedestrians, it would help us reduce the fatality. And also we can collect data from it. We can try to generate energy from it, and have it self-sustain itself rather than having to rely on different energy. So it is a very self-sustaining solution, and it can help us enhance pedestrian experiences as well. Thank you. Should we have political questions?
Let's see. So the idea, as I understand it, is you have lights and haptic sensors or haptic feedback in the sidewalk, so that if somebody's walking across it, it lights up and then vibrates under their feet.
Correct.
What do you think the typical reaction is like?
People's reaction would be so.
What are some things that would limit effectiveness, and how can effectiveness be increased?
So what happens is you when you are in your phone or you are absent-minded, you are usually visually or auditorily not able to see or understand what is going on around you. Like sometimes happens you have car coming in, pushing the horn, still you are not listening to it because of you are busy into it. So what happens is visual touch, like I showed initially, visual touch makes us aware of our surroundings. So this vibration will make the pedestrian aware that they are going to cross the crossway. So this is like right now all the options are non-physical. This is a kind of physical option.
And also another thing that I would like to add on top of it is that whenever a pedestrian, so what kind of solution we want is if you press on it only that time it will vibrate, and if you keep on moving ahead, it will still keep on vibrating. Only when the signal is red. If the signal is green and you are allowed to go, it will not vibrate. So like if you are still walking, you will always be aware of you need to stop. There's something that you need to take care of. It's trying to basically alert a pedestrian who's distracted, and by having visual signals, you're having touch sensors as well, touch like haptic responses. So it is bound to alert the person.
Our system is also built for all kinds of people, including blind people and deaf people.
Yep.
What are some of the obstacles that you would have to overcome to actually get this installed?
So, like, to get it installed, we might have to do technical configuration. This is the vibration sensor. It's slightly extraordinary right now. But so in terms of installation, yes, we need to take into consideration that if we can integrate this with the existing systems. So like I've mentioned earlier about self-sustaining system where you already have electricity that is being generated by
Piezoelectric tiles, basically. Like some companies are making piezoelectric tiles.
So you essentially try to integrate with those solutions. So build this on top of it and implement this in downtown areas where the number of pedestrians are anyways used. So you can have this energy that is being generated by it and power the system. It is essentially an add-on feature rather than being a standalone product. And also you don't have to worry about how you can integrate the signal system, because for maintenance as well you have this people who take care of all the signals, your cameras.
Try and get Jared a chance to.
No, you ask most of the questions.
Okay.
Alright. Alright, good job.
Thank you guys. So I hope you got the gist of what's happening.
The vibration was for the haptic.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty intentional odor.
We wanted to make it a bit intentional
Yeah,
so
we
that
need-
when you walk on it, you realize that there's something going on. So you just stop looking at
So
your phone and
basically
just
you need
look
all
up.
those vibration calculations. Yeah, we can do those. Thank you.
Similar pitching competition.
Probably not. Is there gonna be your way? Everyone else is kind of so.
Just use it as our topic. Do we have time when we go, or do we just start when we're ready? Can you just get spread out, or Miguel, in the middle? Yeah, that way, because yours. Sorry? There you go. Yep. Good afternoon, judges. We are Moist Piglets, and the project that we are presenting for you today is automated runway design. This project has been formed from a merging of problem statements number 1 and 12 at Devil's Invent for the Planet. Number 1 concerns the reduction in carbon footprint, and number 12 concerns the optimization of airports. So what we wanted to do was develop an application for airport designers that would make them more conscious of the carbon footprint that their construction would bring about. We wanted to create an application wherein they could input the aircraft that they plan on using there and get out the carbon emissions of said aircraft and of the facilities that would be required to operate said aircraft, including the runway. So we started with a calculation of the length of runway required and the corresponding carbon footprint.
So when looking at carbon footprint runway construction, which is where the majority of the carbon emissions when dealing with facilities with an airplane, we first have to look at cement fabrication for the facility, which is at about 900 kilograms of CO2 produced per 1 ton of cement used. And the average runway as defined by the FAA is long enough to use about 1.6 million cubic meters of concrete. So that comes out to about 3 tons of CO2 produced per square meter of runway used, with an average runway size of 440,000 square meters. So when we finally finished with the application, we were able to reduce the carbon emissions by about 1 ton by optimizing runways to the appropriate length for the aircrafts required for a given airport. With that, we also had other repercussions such as airport time delays were decreased in terms of sitting on the tarmac, and it helped adhere to the FAA AIP policy, which is a project used to improve airports and funding for new renovations on airports. And there is a discretionary funding category which the CO2, decreased CO2 emissions meets for the discretionary funding application.
So in order to reinforce our idea, we created a GUI, which is a graphic user interface with C#. So we created a database with the most popular airplanes that are used around the world, and we divided it into criteria such as their weight, their wingspan, and such. And this is the welcome window of the GUI, which has 2 criteria. Input from database, which is basically when they select a bunch of airplanes that we have in our database, and manual input is when they want to put their own criteria down, and it calculates it through a formula used. So this is an example of input from database and manual input. And then later, as we manually input it, we store it into a spreadsheet, which we can use for further reference on how we can lessen it.
So obviously this is the first step of implementation because in terms of, we already want to have these aircrafts set aside. So when a airport is looking to construct a new airport, if you have a cap on CO2 emissions, it's easy to figure out what sort of aircrafts and what size of project we're looking at here. Additionally, we want to include stuff like weather, flight destinations, locations of flights, and frequency of flights in order to output things such as number of runways, orientation of runways, and you can have an entire sheet with like vector directions of where the runway should be oriented, and so you can have overlapping runways in such a way reducing the material used to make them, and frequencies of when flights should be leaving from the runways.
In terms of marketing, we're looking to market this product towards airport designers who are concerned with sustainability. As Miguel stated, there is an effort both in the US and UK now, partially funded by the FAA, to develop more sustainable and lower carbon footprint airports. And so this application would help designers towards that goal.
So that's all the time we've got.
Thank you.
It was 1.6 million tons or pounds of CO2 for the runway?
Tons.
Okay.
Because you have about 1.5 meters below the runway of concrete.
So what do airports currently do to plan out runways?
So for length, there's a standard already, and it's just one standard for, so they base it off so there's 2 standards. There's for larger aircraft, like if you're gonna have big carriers like industrial and military carriers, and there is like commercial aircrafts that are the usual. So there's already a set standard for that. That's the same across. So it's.
I can tell you that like runways are not. There's more than 2 runway lengths.
You can be longer than that, but there is like a minimum, if that makes sense. It's like a cutoff. Like it needs to be at this long. You can go farther if you'd like. So what we want to do is say it doesn't have to be that long either. Like if you're working with really small single engine planes, which are already small, you can. There is a safe way to produce an even smaller, where you can even prove, okay, this is what we need, this is the amount we need, you don't need to extend it any farther than that.
General aviation isn't necessarily isn't the large cost in air travel, right? So small single engine planes aren't the major.
No, I was just an example with that.
So another thing to kind of keep in mind, especially when you're talking about reducing carbon emissions, how many times is a runway installed? Versus how many times is it landed on and used.
But that also deals with renovations. So when
renovations
renovating, you don't have to renovate all the way. We only need the essential part of the runway for takeoff that needs to be renovated. So that also deals, because renovation also has to report concrete,
Yeah.
report cement, so that reduces CO2 emissions with that.
So how would this help with reducing time between renovation?
Reducing renovation?
Like, how would this reduce time between renovation intervals?
You don't have to renovate all the way out there. So like if you already have a say 2,000 meter runway, just a huge example, you don't have to renovate all the 2,000 meters. You're only looking at 1,500, for example.
Gary, you got any questions?
So I'm just curious because, right, there's some type of level of safety, and I'm wondering if releasing more CO2 to be safer is better.
Obviously, we haven't looked into the all of the FAA's guidelines on the safety aspect. We did try to call Boeing to get some answers regarding to this stuff. They only picked up once.
And transferred us, and they got out.
So in that way, yes, safety is one of the concerns, but what we are trying to do here is build an application for designers to be conscious of the carbon footprint of what they're creating. So regardless of whether it means they're reducing the amount of concrete they're laying down, this can tell them, or this can be used for as a tool which says, hey, the city of Tempe is only allowing you to put X tons of carbon into the atmosphere, so now we can only use these kind of aircraft.
Okay.
I mean, I would suspect that like cost goes down with reduced runway length. So even if they're acting entirely selfishly, they're probably wanting to reduce runway length already.
Are you asking like why, in terms of, because there's
I
already
think
that.
we're out of time on questions.
Yeah, we're good. Well, thank you.
Thank
you.
Shami, one thing I'd recommend I put in my notes is correlate that 1.6 million tons to something that's easier for us to understand.
We tried, but it wasn't looking
So
good.
I converted it to how a car driving 10,000 miles, it's 500,000 cars.
Okay. Okay. We actually
Which is
looked exactly
crazy.
for a car, but we couldn't find that. If you found it easily, then.
Well, 1 gallon of gasoline's 20 pounds of CO2.
We tried.
And then I divided that by 20, assume 30 miles per gallon, and then if you drive 10,000 miles in a year, bam, done. Rounding. Well, at first I was like, it doesn't seem like that much. And then I'm like, no, it's a whole lot of CO2. COVID. The aces, yeah. I'm ready. Yep.
Alright, you guys.
Hello, our team, the ACEs, worked on early detection in order to stop the coronavirus.
Hi, I'm Priscilla, I myself with the team.
I'm Osir, the business guy.
I'm Amber, the project manager.
I'm Belinda, the biology expert.
I'm Chichi, another biology expert.
And I'm Nina, the tech person.
So currently there is almost 70,000 cases confirmed of the coronavirus, and the number of cases is increasing exponentially. And although this map is showing most of the cases in China, it is becoming a global problem. So with the coronavirus, there is You have to be sick, the authorities need to find you, or you find them and they need to test you. So essentially hospitals are currently working in two parts. So one to treat the patients and another to test incoming patients for if they have the coronavirus. And considering how large of a number of cases that we're having, it is hard for hospitals to be able to accommodate both of those tasks. So our problem statement is to devise an easy, accessible means of early detection of viruses for the average person to mitigate their spread.
So currently, some of the existing solutions include a lab-on-chip, as well as PCR machines, which both use blood samples to determine the presence of viral DNA in the patient's blood. And the solution that was just published yesterday also takes patient blood, but instead uses antibodies and only takes 15 minutes.
So our solution is basically in two parts, where we have a self-tested device and a mobile app. So what we are trying to achieve is that the person takes a sample, does a self-test, and then transfers the results onto the mobile app. What we are trying to achieve here is a portable, easy to use, affordable and accessible, and also accurate way of getting results for their disease. So we have the corona, and then also a sample of how our device will be, and then also how it will be transferred onto the map, onto the app, sorry.
So right now we're going to demo the mobile app that we created for the self-testing. So there are two types of users who can use our mobile app, patient and doctors. For patient, they have to sign into their account first for privacy issues, and then they will be given to the information page about the application, coronavirus, and how to prevent the virus itself. And then in the user's account tab, it will show the user's profile, their username, and also the status of their health right now. And then you can click diagnose yourself to do the diagnosis. And then there was the agreement. And then this is the example of the question in the questionnaire, such as what symptoms you are having. And then after the questionnaires, you're prompt to the scanner for scanning the result of the device. And then it will be given to the AI to be analyzed in the diagnosis. And then it's processing the result right now. And for instance, in this user, there is 10% probability that he might get the virus, and the result will be shown in the profile section of the application.
So a business model is a basis on which a business enterprise is built, and we intend to convert our product that we discussed into a business enterprise. And we have our business model shown here on the screen. There are 8 different facets of it. I'll highlight on a few of them. That's the key partners. We intend to partner with the laboratories that are currently devising the means to detect the virus. And also some of our value propositions are the additional functionality of interpreting the results that the device detects, and also avoiding the risk of infection by the patient going to the hospital, and also leveraging people's need for privacy on their health issues. Our customer segments are the people who haven't been in around high-risk regions, and also people who intend to know their status. Our channels are social media and in-app advertisements, and our revenue stream are the purchases of the tool that's integrated with our app software.
So we hope to help the average person detect the virus in his or her system as early as possible, and in doing so, prevent the spread of the disease, and also decrease the number of cases that are there, as seen in the graph shown. So the graph is kind of a measure of our success, and then we hope to see an exponential increase, a stagnation, and an exponential decrease as people get treatment. And also we hope to raise awareness through the information that will be on our app. So as people read about the information, they get educated. And as they get educated, it also reduces the stigmatization associated with the disease. And also in our long-term plan, we hope to be able to use our device to detect more viruses and diseases that will come up in the near future.
Finally, here are some of the considerations that we will be using, such as privacy, accuracy, coordination between.
Well, that's the time that we have to
Let's cut you
Sorry.
off. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we get pretty close on the time sometimes. So.
Sorry, I don't know if you wanted to see something else.
Fine. So, how did you decide on the solution that you went with?
So ultimately, what we were first doing was trying to make the device in order to test for the disease. But as we were researching, yesterday the latest device of just taking like 1 drop of blood and then being able to test for antibodies was kind of like the solution that we were also converging on. So we also realized that we don't necessarily have the biological know-how to be able to test for these things. So we figured that if we already at that same time came up with this sort of app idea to take the results from the machine and put it in an app and make it so that way it's easily readable. And so we decided to expand on taking the app and connecting it to some of the devices that are already existing.
So the issues that we're focusing on are like lack of knowledge as well as fear of going to hospitals and getting treatment because people are afraid that they're going to get sick by going, and overcrowding of the hospitals themselves. So we're trying to mitigate the burden on the current existing institutions by empowering the users themselves.
Yeah, so the solution originally that we want to do is some sort of like, pregnancy test. You can do it like by yourself, and then after that you can go to the hospital to check it more. So we were planning to do that, but again, like what Amber said, we researched more, and then yesterday at 12:23, an article was published saying that like pretty similar solution is already invented. So that's why we want to focus more on the mobile app.
Got 1 minute left for questions.
So what, do you have any concerns in terms of, let's say someone has a 50% chance? What if that was, I guess what are your concerns with maybe like a false positive or false negative?
So that's one of the things that the World Health Organization which is why they counsel or advise against self-testing, because of like unnecessary like personal distress in case of a false positive or false negative, and then people will continue to spread the disease. But we will make sure that in our app that we provide a lot of education before providing the results to ensure that users understand that the tests are not perfect and they should seek further medical advice. But this is more of a way to provide that education and a transition into further treatment.
Yeah, so the current solution that we have, that we already have, it's actually like 99.6% accuracy already, so it's already pretty good, and that's why we want to combine it with the mobile app to just increase like the 0.4 accuracy there.
Alright, that's all for now.
What team are you? Team
X. So just tell us when you start.
You said Team X?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
My name is Siddhant and he's my teammate Christopher. So we are planning to make an innovation into the bus systems and provide a good solution for making a better city, like as a future smart city. What I actually faced currently, and everyone of you have already faced, is when you go for a bus ride, when you go for any public transport systems, you do not have a guarantee, you do not have an assurance that a bus is going to come for you at a particular specific time. Can you board on it? Why hasn't it come to me yet? Should I go walking? It's a confusion all the time, and it actually affects you on a daily basis. So this system is not only prevalent in a small city, it's also present in a very populated city as well. And I don't have a solution right now, and I want to see this thing in the upcoming smart cities over here. So we have proposed a solution, which you'll say.
Right. So right now there's traffic is everywhere in the world. Our streets are littered with cars taking up everything and making transit through a city slow down to a slow crawl. Right now there are buses where there aren't even enough seats that people have to sit on the top of the bus. All right. People fight to get a seat because everyone tries to enter a bus at the exact same time. Imagine now that you do not have to worry about this. From your smartphone, you can go ahead and see when the bus is coming, see how full it is, and then confirm a seat. And then you can pay and use your phone as the way to get into the bus.
So we have 3 entities involved in this. One is the kiosk present at every bus stop. One will be the buses, which will have a GPS location and a Wi-Fi network, and one will be the cellular networks, which every commuter will be using. All of them will be connected to a common server, a cloud server. And this is the diagram which we actually have to showcase. So when you come to a bus stop, you just tap on using NFC or a QR code. You authenticate that you are present at that bus stop right now, and then you can book a ride. You can see the available routes at that bus stop and see if there's available seats. And you will be added onto a queue, which will be ensuring you that if you are present at that time, you will be added to a queue, which will give you a spot in the bus, which will be next, or the upcoming buses. So if you are in the yellow line, so it means that it's around 50% possible that you get to the bus. If you are red, it's definitely sure that you will not be getting a seat in that bus. It will be next bus which will come in, and you can get an estimate of how much time you have to wait for the next bus also to come.
Okay, so why isn't something like this already out there yet? We have other apps that go over and talk about transit times. We have apps that talk about how to get to a place. We have apps that give you one place to another, and then we have apps that will go over and tell you how you can buy a ticket. But not all of them are in one place. So right now, we use GPS, we use Wi-Fi, and we can all integrate all this information into one single app.
So what is the solution doing? There are existing applications like Google Maps, there's the Transit app. So how can we integrate all of them together? We want to provide a better logistic solution wherein the bus providers, the commuters both benefit at the same time. So we want to provide a solution which gathers the statistical information, which also provides them a better service in the future. And we want to improvise the communication between the commuters and the bus providers over there. So this is where a smart city solution will actually help us to go about it.
All right, and then when implementing our solution only costs an initial outlay that will be to improve the infrastructure so that the solution works. The actual cost of operation day to day will not increase because as a bus traveling from one place to another has the same cost. But if we can make more riders use the bus due to the conveniences that this solution offers, the overall cost of running the bus will be down.
And I would like to help you understand what our big goal over here is. It's not about just improving the community to make people change their mind from using their private cars or go to a public bus. We want to help them to understand that they are actually doing a major impact to the community. They decrease the traffic which you have on the roads. They reduce the traffic congestion, and also they help the fuel consumption. The fuel consumption emits a lot of carbon dioxide, and it also has an impact on the nature. When you use public transport more, you actually help your community to have less pollution. And just go ahead. I would like to tell that what is our target audience over here? Who are we? We want to aggregate all the bus lines into our system, and we will provide a solution and a reliability to every commuter who is using our application. And this is where we go.
So you're going to charge the user more money?
No. So our profit model remains the same. So there are 3 entities involved in this. The government always subsidizes every public transport available over here. the bus providers have their own cut in it, and the commuters pay a minimal subsidized amount. So what we want to do is, when we have so many entities communicating with each other, we have a lot of data which can be gathered. We can actually predict which stop requires more people. Then there is a surge in the number of people who want to use this system, and then we increase the number of bus services to that. So this actually improves the amount of passengers which the bus provider is getting, and also helps the commuter to get from point A to point B without having a hassle of not even knowing whether he's going to get in the bus or not. Or else he just have to book an Uber ride. But sincerely speaking, it is too costly, right, even right now. And you don't always get Uber ride share. If the driver takes you, you get it. Otherwise, you are on your own. You have to walk that way.
And by using future predictive models, we can actually say, reduce the amount of time a person waits at a bus stop. This will make it more convenient to them as well, and then they'll be more likely to use the system.
I would also like to.
How will you make money?
So, how will I make money in this? I am an aggregator over here. I want systems like Valley Metro. There are many public transports which are subsidized by the government, because government does not entirely give money for this. They have private entities to use it. What these people do not have is the logistics. They do not have the infrastructure for this, which we want to use the government subsidiary to pay for the Wi-Fi and all the beacon devices, all the NFC taps which we can enable. And definitely people have, when we want to plan a smart city, people have to be there with the Wi-Fi.
We're going to develop the hardware.
So basically the sales of the installation and hardware.
Yeah,
The
so
hardware and the
we would
program
be
will
the
be our control.
we would be the aggregators who will be integrating all of these bus services, and we provide the reliability and assurance that they make profit.
We're making the hardware.
And we make a cut out of it.
The other obvious one would be like since you're talking about utilizing data, targeted advertising, like that would be one of the.
Well, with a smart city, we can use data in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. When actually ride sharing came into picture, where Uber or Lyft, they actually even have a referral, right? We can actually use it and promote. So when there are more happy customers or more happy people who are actually commuting by it, more people are actually driven to get rid of their private vehicles and go for this bus line. And this actually improves the revenue for both the bus lines and us. So this is how we, I think, go forward with it.
From this data, we can determine where people are going from which location, because you have to check in and check out of the bus.
So there would also be like a subscription model, like.
No, this
we
is
do not need a subscription model. So also there's.
Well, we're out of time for the questions.
Okay, you have the city to decide how to charge for it.
Please remember that there are people presenting up here, so I don't want to see any side conversations. Even during Q&A, I know they're having conversations, but there's still learning points for all of you. It's incredibly rude. What's wrong with that?
Good afternoon, fellow judges.
We're still working.
Okay.
Yeah.
Glad you're ready now.
Team one.
Team one, yeah.
Everyone's ready.
All right.
Good afternoon, judges. This is Team Y, and we are here to provide the solution for pedestrian deaths called as
shady fence.
Nothing will prevent a pedestrian from using his or her phone during an emergency on the road, and nothing will prevent a person from jaywalking during an unfavorable weather condition. The only thing we can do is to prevent them from doing this, and this is what our solution is going to do.
So for our design requirements, what we're looking at was the reduction in pedestrian deaths, reduction in jaywalking, and increasing awareness while crossing roads, like making the pedestrian more aware of his surrounding. And also we looked at reducing the cost and making our solution adaptable to varying geographies. So it's like different areas can use it.
So during our research, we found out that 79% of the deaths that happen in the Phoenix area happen in these dozen hotspots, and they have something that's similar. All the deaths are happening on these 5 lanes road that have speed limits around 40 miles per hour. And these deaths don't happen on intersections; they're happening between these intersections, which are about a mile and a half away. And people just don't want to walk that mile, across the road, walk the other way again. So they just jaywalk the road.
So during our brainstorm, we came up with solutions and we weighed their consequences, which are more of violation of laws and invasion of privacy. So with that, the CCTV cameras were eliminated and the disruption of connectivity was eliminated based on those consequences. And we decided to integrate warning on sidewalks, fences on sidewalks and medians, and comfortable crosswalks with signs on sidewalks.
So the solution which we came on to was to make fences on the medians. If there are no medians, we should build medians. We could make fences very interesting, like have some engravings on it, and we could like build shelters on the crosswalks where the people wait to cross to provide a temporary relief from harsh weathers, whether it's too hot or it's raining. We could make the shelter very interesting by placing some screen or adverts over there. We could have water fountains or misters to cool them down in a hot weather.
So we looked at other cities doing the same thing. There's a few places in Arizona who are building medians, and this place in Tiruvananthapuram saw that just by building medians and fences in the middle of the road, the number of deaths was reduced by around 65%. So having a simple solution like that is really good for like stopping deaths. So this is what the solution would look like. A lot of people were saying that it's going to make the streets look like a jail, but in reality they look very sleek. It's not disruptive. The shelters would also be really simple, have some kind of lights or misters in them that's going to promote people to go to the crosswalks instead of just jaywalking.
So these are some examples of the quotes and celebrities which we'll be using on our adverts to discourage jaywalkers.
So in terms of the cost, we found out that per mile it's around $1,000 to just have the fence. If you have the ledges on the sidewalks themselves, it's around $2,500, and the shelters cost a bit more, so around $5,000. And if you have those water fountains and misters, it goes up to $10,000. But even that is significantly less than like competing solutions. And it's very non-intrusive. You don't have to teach people how to do it. There's no app that you install. This is something that you can integrate in your daily lives.
So the team members which participated in this group were Dhruva Lokegaonkar, Patience Yegua, Sanjay Pathak, Juliet Abdo. Did I say that wrong? I'm so sorry. And Matthew Vaughn. I can't pronounce the last name. He couldn't be here because someone stole his bike. Yeah,
no.
that sucks.
That's it.
And the end.
So you mentioned those lower costs compared to competitive solutions. What are some examples of competitive solutions?
So one of them was they build these on basically they have T intersections in a lot of places, which they found was a lot less cause a lot less accidents compared to a cross intersection. So a lot of places are rebuilding that. Some places have sensors under the road, so if you step on the road, it's going to warn you. But again, you have to dig up the road for that. Some places have like sensors on the crosswalks themselves, so you can't go outside, it's going to buzz you. Or some places have cameras that basically fine you if you try to jaywalk.
Sorry. You're fine.
How tall are the fences going to be?
So these fences over here are gonna be around 6 feet in the middle of the roads. The ledges themselves, they can vary depending on whatever the government wants. So we looked at fences that were around 3 feet, basically anything you can sit on or you can have pictures on. And the shelters are gonna be around 8 to 9 feet, so you can have shade under them.
Shelters are basically for people who are in a hurry or just like provide temporary leave. They just don't want to rush on the road just because it's a bad weather out here.
So I guess obviously you're assuming they won't try to jump over the fence, climb the fence?
A lot of people will, of course, try to jump over the fence, but it's we can't target everybody. The people who are jumping over the fence, there's literally nothing you can do to stop them from jumping the fence unless you're recording them, finding them. But what it does, it significantly reduces the number of people who do jaywalk. We saw around 65% in that particular city, but numbers vary from like 40 to 90%.
So sorry, you said 65%. So someone else installed the fences?
Yeah, a lot of places are doing that, but a lot of people don't do it because a lot of these cities are badly planned and there's nobody proposing the solution in these cities.
I think that's.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yep.
Any more? All right. Good job, team.
Good work, everybody.
Good job, everyone.
What I'm going to ask you to do now is make sure that you have turned in all of the hardware that you checked out this weekend. So.
Oh no, I need to take this home.
That's too bad, man. You're gonna write a list of all the stuff and you can order it yourself. So please, yes.
What if we do the video though?
Fair point. All right. Hold on to your stuff for now. We'll talk later. We might leave a little late because of that. Okay. Ignore me. At the very least, make sure you clean up all of your messes in the whole space. So I know who was parked in which area, so I can pinpoint the mess.
All right, I'm gonna go to the restroom real quick.